Hi, and welcome back. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Emily Thomas.
And I'm Mike Monticello.
So today, we're going to talk about Honda. This company has been pretty busy redesigning 5 models in the past 2 model years. We're talking about the Accord, the Civic, the CR-V, and the HR-V, and today's car du jour. Actually, that's redundant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about the Honda Pilot. This was redesigned for 2023. It's a 3-row mid-sized SUV, long history of good performance in CRS testing. This is the largest, most powerful SUV in Honda's history, with an all-new dual overhead cam 285 horsepower, 3.5-liter V6 engine. I sound like I know what I'm talking about. Paired with a 10-speed automatic transmission. This all adds up to about 21 miles per gallon overall, according to the EPA. It's available in 7 or 8 passenger seating configurations. The Pilot also comes with lots of standard safety features: automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, lane keeping assist, and adaptive cruise control are all standard. And wow, what a convenience. We have Doc M's here because the Pilot also has a standard rear seat belt reminder and rear occupant alert system to warn of a child or a pet potentially left behind. We purchased a touring version for our test program, which Honda predicts will be, the trim with the highest sales volume. The only option we got was a $395 Radiant Red, not just red, Radiant Red paint, which brought the grand total to $50,240. Not small change. So, Emily, I'm going to turn to you first. In our first drive, which Sweet Johnny Links took care of, we still call him that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
At least Monty does.
We said, and I'm quoting here, much of what made past Pilots a good choice for families remains. The interior is roomy, third-row access remains easy, and passenger and cargo room are generous. This makes the Pilot an ideal family vehicle and a perfect long-trip companion. Would you agree with this?
True or false?
I know, I feel like I'm on trial right now. Do you?
Where were you in the night?
Oh, gosh. I definitely would support those statements. Fun fact, the Honda Pilot, the previous generation, was actually one of the test vehicles that we use in the child seat program. It's one of our fit to vehicle cars, or it was until we just recently transitioned it out because it got too old. The model year that we had.
That happens to some of us. We get
we get
not anyone here, obviously. But we use that primarily because, the geometry made it a little challenging for fits, but it's also a really common family vehicle, right. The size of the vehicle, the interior design, etc. So the previous version and this version, I think if you have a family, it's still going to deliver on a lot of those things. I was able to do my fits in the car and kind of do some of my rear seat assessments. And it's really great for the families that need to be able to fit 3 across that second row bench. Honda does a great job with the Pilot and the Odyssey of putting dedicated lower anchors in every rear seating position in that second row. There's also one set in the third row, so if you need to be able to do a latch install there, you could. That allows for you to have more flexibility in terms of, where you're able to install certain seats and things like that, because a lot of times in that center seating position, it's really hard to get a good secure installation, but with lower anchors, that's much easier, especially if you're doing that 3 across, like I said. Overall, the fits for seatbelt installations were pretty good in the second row. Third row is where it gets a little tricky because it's still kind of cramped back there. So I would recommend putting forward-facing car seats or boosters in the third row. Another great thing that Honda does here is that they actually have tether anchors on all the third row seats, which is not common. A lot of the OEMs only put maybe like 1 or 2 back there, or none at all. So another plus there. And I think, if you have kids and you're lugging around a bunch of crap and you are lugging around a bunch of humans, it would be a really good car for that. It would fit everybody. It's nice and boxy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's
Oh, definitely is one of the highlights for me for the pilot is the great visibility and the airy cabin and all that stuff. But we can transition from crawling around the car inside to actually putting it out on the road or our track. And I'm gonna kind of transition over here to Mike and say, so what is it like to drive?
I mean, I was just happy listening about the lower anchors and tether anchors. You know I love lower anchors. Those things are awesome, right?
yes, for all the child seats to help me install.
You're just going to sink this whole podcast with this anchor stuff.
That's what I do.
Oh my God.
Okay, so what's it like to drive? Honestly, not that much different than the last pilot. It seems more like more of a design, styling refresh than anything. It has the big news about the powertrain is that it's really not that big news. And by that, I mean, it's still a 3.5 liter V6. Yes, it has 85 horsepower now when it had 280 before, right? So 5 more horsepower.
A whole 5.
It gives that extra oomph.
And of course, it does have a 10-speed automatic versus a 9-speed automatic. But I think the big news is that they didn't switch to a turbo 4-cylinder, like, for instance, the new Toyota Highlander has. So that's kind of interesting that they didn't do that, because that is the switch, right? If you've had a V8, you go to a turbo V6. If you've been using a V6, people are going to turbo 4-cylinders. So Honda did not do that yet. Maybe they
they're a
will,
little behind.
but there's some good things about that, right? So there's something just very sweet about a naturally aspirated engine, which means an engine that is not turbocharged, okay, not supercharged or anything like that.
Thank you.
And so it makes good power, has plenty of power, and it shifts pretty well. What I would say is not so great is, and I'm curious because sometimes I find you and I actually agree on some things that some like details of driving experience we both agree on quite often. And what I notice is that I don't know if it's a very short first gear, but it can be kind of abrupt off the line, which I found. And so,
A little.
Yeah. And so because it seems like it's such a short first gear, the engine ends up winding out pretty high, and it gets kind of loud when you first 1-2 shift, 2-3 shift. And that would be my only real downside with the powertrain is that it just comes across as kind of loud, right?
Yeah.
Which
It did the thing that you taught me. It goes, and then it comes back down again.
Yeah.
That's a technical term.
yeah. So
He did it with the hand motions and everything. So
yeah, I
part of
mean,
the
that's usually,
experience.
I'm usually more talking about, CVT when I do that amazing impersonation of a continuously variable transmission. But it does sort of seem like that because it does rev kind of, if you get hard on the throttle, kind of, it just feels like it's going like, why is it so loud? But it actually isn't that loud of an engine. And I think the upshifts are pretty smooth. You feel occasional the downshifts, they come with a little bit of a bump, but nothing too bad. And then when you think about the handling, well, first of all, you don't typically buy a mid-sized SUV, three-row SUV for handling. That's just not what they're about, right? So, and this one is kind of like how it was before. It does okay. I was actually kind of impressed with the lack of body roll in normal to just slightly above normal driving, which, if you think about it, is exactly the buyer they're intended it for, right? People are probably not going to push it that hard. When you start to push it a little further, wow, then the body roll starts to set in. And I think you agree with me, Quince. The steering is just kind of lifeless, and so that it handles
loosey-goosey.
Yeah, it handles okay, kind of in spite of the not so great steering. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it seems like that's consistent with the approach.
Yeah.
Because the handling isn't uber sporty, the steering isn't really well weighted, but that's the audience.
Yeah.
They're like in the middle, kind of.
Right.
But for the body roll, I felt like it was too much for me because we have some vehicles, right, where it's really stiff. You feel every bump and rut in the road. This one, I felt like I didn't feel the bumps and ruts as much, but it compensated by kind of sloshing me around as I was driving, and I didn't like that. It felt very kind of wobbly as I drove it, and it's not like
Well, hold on a second.
Wallowy?
I think
Wobbly.
I think
Wobbly.
the term you used was swoopy springing. Okay.
swoopy was the fact that it's not swoopy. It's a box. It doesn't have those like stylistic aspects of it where it's going to give you those, pillars that are in your way, and it's a box.
So it doesn't have swoopy styling, but it does have wobbly handling.
Springy
handling.
Springy.
Springy and wobbly. Yes.
But so I'm sorry. So I mean, with the handling kind of really being not so satisfactory to you, so you maybe wouldn't think of this as a great road trip car.
For me personally, no, because I feel like I didn't like feeling like I was thrown around a lot, and I wouldn't want that on a long trip. Short drives,
How hard were you driving this thing?
I wasn't driving it that hard. I took it around the back roads over here.
She's going for your job.
I know.
No, Mike is coming for your job. Michael wants to do the interior.
He does?
finish.
That's her son, by the way, in case you guys weren't sure who she's talking about.
My 6-year-old son.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I would say I wouldn't necessarily like it for that reason, but everything else about it makes it a good road trip car.
Right.
The non-swoopiness, the box-like shape of it makes it great for having to pack it up with a bunch of stuff. You'd easily be able to fit all your luggage in there. You can keep that third row down or have it half up, whatever you want. Either way, it's very accommodating and very flexible interior design, which is great because depending on what you're doing, you might only need some of the seating positions. You might need more cargo space, whatever it is. So for that aspect of it, totally. The driving part, for me personally, I don't think I would go for this Pilot.
Okay. So Mike, you're not going to load up the Pilot with kids, but you're going to take into account other stuff.
Yeah, I might load it up with bicycles.
Right.
Yeah, bicycles.
So is this road trip work?
Yeah, I mean, I've taken a Pilot on road trips before, and it's totally fine for if you're just, if it's mostly highway and you're going, you're going to be sticking to the highway and straight and whatever. I think it works great for that. And this one in particular works well for me because the driving position is well sorted for me. And what I mean by that is that it has plenty of headroom. I don't have any. I'm going to talk about it. Right knee center console intrusion.
Do you have some
She
right
loves
now?
when I talk about that. And it doesn't have that. And so to not feel squished in and a well-placed armrest, those are the things that are important to me for a road trip car, right?
Yeah.
But the one downside with that is that for whatever reason, the seat just doesn't work for me. I found it overly firm, and it kind of runs out of side bolstering on the seat back, so it kind of up in my rib cage. It kind of lets me maybe that's what you're doing. You're flopping around in the seat because it's
wasn't
not
holding you
supportive
well
enough.
enough? I mean,
Hey, I need a hug every once in a while, and I like a seat that hugs me, and this one
know you
doesn't really do that, and it's too firm. So for me, that would be a reason why I probably wouldn't buy it, because the seat's got to work for you. And the seat is so obviously dependent on body type and preference, right? Some people like a really firm seat. Some people want a really squishy seat. Some people don't want any side bolstering. I want tons of side bolstering. So for me, this seat doesn't work, but lots of other aspects of the car,
I will say
SUV
the
do.
driving position is so much better.
Yeah.
If I had to, we have a Pathfinder. And I know a lot of you guys love the Pathfinder. I can't stand driving that
I
because
don't like the Pathfinder.
I don't like the Pathfinder either.
maybe not you two. Maybe
Don't
not
be
you two.
accusing
Maybe
us of
somebody
that.
else.
Other
Well,
people that
I've
work
heard
here,
other
maybe.
people say they really like the Pathfinder,
Right.
but it's really difficult for me because the driving position is terrible for me. I cannot get my seat adjusted high enough so that I can see over the dash properly, and I feel like I am trying to drive with the tips of my toes on the pedals and peer over the dash.
That's not good.
It's terrible. It's
Right.
very uncomfortable. But the Pilot is a similar class vehicle.
Right.
And I was fine. I could see really great. The visibility is wonderful. I could reach everything that I needed to. I could be as close as I needed to reach the pedals and see over the dash and do all the things. And I was so much happier about that.
I think it's so cool that you brought up the Pathfinder, because this morning I drove in with the Infiniti QX60, which is, basically the twin of the Pathfinder. And I had the same criticisms. Because I can't
feel like
raise
you wrote this?
I can't raise the seat high enough in the QX, just like you can't in the Pathfinder. I mean, obviously same sort of company, same design, stuff
Right.
like that. So I'm totally with you on that.
It was terrible.
And Mike, I like your assessment of the Pilot. I'm almost 100% on. I like the seats, but I get how you say that they're stiff. The last Honda CRV. And the Civic, I thought the seats were stiff. Sort of a Honda thing.
Yep.
I didn't find that as much with the Pilot,
Yep.
but the visibility, the headroom,
Yep.
everything to me totally works. I spent about 8+ hours driving this vehicle
Dang.
up in Vermont, New Hampshire. It was my wife was working. It was like a Saturday or Sunday or whatever. And I just I'm going to just put miles on this car. It was awesome. I really like this car a lot. And the thing that stands out to me is the controls. We drive so many high-end cars that have uber ridiculous controls that are super hard to figure out. I maintain that if you let your neighbor borrow the new Honda Pilot, they could figure out everything in about 30 seconds. You know, and that to me
because they're physical. They're physical buttons
Yeah.
and knobs, and they're not touch capacitive or on a panel or a touch screen.
Right. It's so intuitive. So I hats off to Honda for doing this. And one of the great comments that John Linkov made about the new Pilot compared
is that Sweet Johnny Links guy?
That's Sweet Johnny Links guy. But he was talking about the Acura MDX, which is his family has. And he's like, the Acura has this stupid touchpad that doesn't work at all. Right. The Pilot, which is a lower cost and a lower prestige kind of thing, has much better controls than the higher end version. Right. So I thought that was awesome, and I think he's right on the money with that. And just a reminder, these are our first impressions of the Honda Pilot. Check out our first drive at consumerreports.org for more. We're going to be doing wrapping up the testing soon, and we'll have the full test results. So definitely check it out if you're a fan of this car, because a bunch of us actually are. Which leads us to our audience questions. We love your questions. Text 30-second videos. Send them all to talkingcars@icloud.com. That's talkingcars@icloud.com. First, the question we've got today is from Jeff, who writes, what happened to 2.5 and 5 mile per hour bumpers? I just watched your excellent review of the new Lexus RX 350, and it looks like a body shop's dream car. It appears there isn't any sort of front bumper or protection if you accidentally pull too close to something. Same for the rear. It looks like the hatch will get damaged if you back into something, even very gently. So what's the story? No government requirements anymore? I get that there's crash protection, but how about everyday oopsies? So we're going to talk about these oopsies, and
we call them love taps in
love
Philly.
taps. Moment of silence for the Eagles. Sorry.
Don't get me started.
I'm going to get just started with the bumper. So Emily, you looked into this. What's the current state of bumper protection in cars these days?
So I did look it up, and the bumper standard is alive and well. It's still in effect. It's not that the regulation has changed or that the requirement for vehicles to meet the bumper standard has changed. Bumper design has changed. And I would say that even bumper function has changed. Whereas before, your classic bumpers were meant for little oopsies or love taps. Now they have a lot more things that they need to do. That's where a lot of the sensors are for the various safety systems that we have in our vehicles. And they have more aesthetic to them now. They have more function, more design. Your traditional bumper, the kind that he's looking for, is likely still there, but it's behind the superficial part that has also these other pieces to it.
Right. But I mean, in terms of just even a little, a supermarket, little incident, backing into somebody or something, it's going to be a lot more expensive to probably replace these with those sensors. Right?
Yeah. We had one instance where, I had one instance where I was at a stop sign and the person coming up on the ramp behind me, they thought I was going and I hadn't moved yet.
They forgot to stop?
Yeah, then kind of. And so they tapped me, and it looked like it was only minor damage to one of the test cars. But then when John took a look at it and he sent it to the repair shop, it ended up being a higher cost because the sensors had to be recalibrated. Right. And so you think that it's not going to be that much now, but it actually is more because we have a lot more technology that's integrated into these designs.
Mm-hmm. But you and I remember, the chrome bumpers.
Can I go to camera one? I'm gonna do my old man voice. Back in my day, you could see the bumpers on cars, and they were either chrome or they had this rubbery stuff. That's my old man voice. Rubbery, kind of almost
like your regular
rubberish.
voice. Oh.
Anyway, they were metal, they were chrome, they had maybe a rubberish type material, and so you could actually bump into something and often there'd be no damage or maybe just a little scrape to that black material.
Yeah.
Or not worst case scenario, but also potentially the bumper just maybe gets, like bent up slightly. And what do? We live with it for the rest of the time we own the car. We don't ever do anything with it, right? Because it's just up slightly
you're not gonna get it
or
repaired.
down slightly.
Yeah.
But the point is, in terms of like, you don't have to worry about, did you break the plastic that is covering the bumper on the modern cars? Did you scrape the paint? Did you chip it, scratch it, whatever? None of that's on there. It was just metal and or this rubberish material. And so I kind of miss those, although aesthetically, all you kids care about now is aesthetics and aerodynamics for some reason. And so the days of the actual, seeing the bumper and the days of, almost no damage or potentially no damage if you do have an oopsie, those are gone.
All right, but you can't go out driving anywhere without seeing a car that's been like duct taped together with one of the new bumpers with the facade.
Because it's falling off.
Right,
The front clip, as we call it, is
Right.
someone bumped into something. So now the front clip of the car, basically
Is
all the
hanging
plastic
down.
stuff
So
is
you-
hanging down.
Prop it up. You put some duct tape on
And that
it.
wouldn't
When I
happen
showed
back
up-
that wouldn't happen back in the old days.
When I showed up for my interview at the track in my 96 Corolla, it had some issues with its bumper, but what did I do? I just lived with it because I had a 96 Corolla and
There
it was
you go.
fine. Didn't matter. The car still drove.
And as long-term fans of Consumer Reports may know, we used to have part of our test protocols was a bumper basher.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
We had. Yeah, it's not like the bumper cars at Disneyland or anything, but we had this apparatus that was built into the concrete floor of our garage that simulated a tap on a bumper. And the reason we got into this, and it's a whole thing, but it's like the government at one time required no damage to bumpers and impacts up to 5 miles per hour. But then they lowered it to 2.5 miles an hour because car companies complained. So yes, the government kind of caved to the car companies. But we continued to test for compliance and reported on the repair cost for consumer information, but only for vehicles that were classified as passenger cars.
Right.
And then
The
as we
standard.
all,
Not SUVs.
Right. And then as we know, in the late 80s and 90s, the market was shifting to SUVs and pickup trucks, which weren't subject to these kinds of regulations. So it kind of created a double standard for us because most people aren't buying the sedans and sports cars. They're buying trucks, but we're not testing them.
Oh, I see. So because you weren't doing the bumper bashing on everything, it didn't make sense to only do it on some and not all.
So we began a process of doing away with this because partly because the public was confusing it with crash test safety, which it really wasn't a thing, and it was really costing us like about $50,000 a year to bash some of these bumpers. Do an
whole test
assessment
car
for
right
how
there.
much it costs, and then we go get it repaired. And so we really we said we really don't feel that we need to do this anymore. And I got to give a shout out to Gabe Shenharsh. He was a really great historian when it came to this, and kind of told the rise and eventually fall of the bumper.
I
bash.
thought you were about to tell us that he was really great at bashing into things.
Well, that's
ran the test.
That's a different issue. How we treat our test cars. News at 11. No, he was really good about kind of talking about how we started and how we eventually kind of phased out of it. And who knew that we had so much to talk about when it came to bumpers?
I know.
I mean, really?
Yeah, seriously.
All right. Well,
big thing.
We're gonna put a halt to that and try to wrap this up. This awesome podcast was, of course, produced by super producer Dave Abrams, edited by Andrew. I still play guitar, Belize, and of course, Anatoly the Great Shumsky. Just a reminder. Keep the questions coming to talkingcars@icloud.com and check the show notes if you want more information on the vehicles and the topics that we discussed. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.